From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. The United Nations Security Council has rejected a draft resolution on Venezuela presented by the U.S. The result of the vote was 9 in favor, 3 against, and 3 abstentions. But the resolution fell because 2 permanent members, Russia and China, exercised their veto. South Africa also voted against the resolution. The U.S. resolution called for immediate presidential elections in Venezuela and unrestricted access to the so-called aid.
The result of the voting is as follows. Votes in favor, 9. Votes against, 3. Abstentions, 3. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council.
A second vote took place on a draft resolution submitted by Russia. 4 member states voted in favor, 7 against, and 4 abstained. So this resolution also fell. The Russian motion called for a peaceful political solution to the situation in Venezuela. It backed the Montevideo mechanism to promote dialogue between the Bolivarian government and the opposition. The Russian ambassador to the UN spoke following the vote, maintaining support for Venezuela's internal dialogue.
This is a decision to be taken by the Venezuelan people themselves. Do not decide for them. Most important is dialogue, and you are literally and figuratively burning down bridges. Our document contained support for the Montevideo mechanism. However, dialogue and mediation clearly are not what Washington and those delegations supporting it are not what they are aiming for.
And Venezuela's ambassador to the UN, Samuel Moncada, provided statements following the 2 votes, condemning the violent acts that transpired last weekend at the Colombia-Venezuela border, including their procedure under which the U.S. tried to force so-called humanitarian aid into the country.
There is no international law, Mr. President, which allows a government of any kind to show up at a border with another country and attempt to force its way into that foreign territory and force in an unknown cargo with using unknown protocols. 3 days after the attack, at those points, there are still people with masks on throwing bombs into Venezuelan territory, and we still haven't seen not a single mention of this or any condemnation of these aggressions.
The ambassador spoke to the media following the meeting, saying that a very cynical plan is being carried out by the U.S. under the pretense of aiding what they call a humanitarian crisis.
They are planning a clandestine operation against Venezuela right now. At the same time, they are talking about humanitarian efforts, and at the same time, they are stealing our money. This is something outrageous indeed. The international community, by the way, is not the coalition made up by the United States that is pretending to substitute the actual international community, which is 193 countries all together in the General Assembly here at the United Nations, and not the 15 countries that they think they can rule the world because they are powerful enough for that.
During the press conference, Moncada was asked about Univision journalist Jorge Ramos, who returned to the U.S. after being expelled from Venezuela.
He did it on purpose. He insulted President Maduro because he wanted to be expelled, as he did in other cases as well. But he wasn't ever arrested. But more than that, when he got to Miami, back to his country, he said, I got the support of Vice President Mike Pence, and I got the support of Senator Marco Rubio, meaning that he was in a game trying to showcase himself, and it's ridiculous when journalists trying to turn themselves into the news instead of conveying news.
On Wednesday, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza denounced the continuous threats the U.S. and its allies are posing to his country during a visit to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, adding that the Venezuelan government is willing to start a dialogue with the opposition as a way to peacefully solve the political situation.
Venezuela has defended dialogue as a way to solve the political crisis in his country. This at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza also reaffirmed the will of President Nicolás Maduro to meet with the U.S. President Donald Trump.
Unfortunately, our Colombian brothers support the United States and have borrowed their territory to attack Venezuela, trying to force humanitarian aid across the border. We have said it here before, that with the excuse of delivering humanitarian crisis, an intervention is intended in my country. The U.S., its Vice President Mike Pence and its President Donald Trump say that they are not ruling out a military intervention in Venezuela, violating the United Nations Charter. The United Nations and this Council have to raise their voices against this.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, met with the Venezuelan delegation in Geneva headed by Arreaza. The delegation once again extended Bachelet an invitation to visit Venezuela.
We are preparing the visit of the Human Rights Commission team to evaluate the agenda and, like that, prepare the visit of the Higher Commissioner Michelle Bachelet. She is welcomed in Venezuela. Her presence is very important in our country.
Threats against the government of President Nicolás Maduro are still in the agenda of the Lima Group. This while international experts advocate for dialogue as a solution to the crisis.
There's no other solution than dialogue because there are around 8 million Venezuelans that are dedicated Chavistas. And even if a coup were successful, these people are not going to disappear. Do they want a civil war? Both sides have to dialogue.
Venezuela will keep on denouncing the attacks on their country to the international community. They have asked the Human Rights Council and the non-aligned movement to raise their voices against the countries who want a war in Venezuela.
Thousands marched across the capital of Venezuela on Thursday to express their support for President Nicolás Maduro. The president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, joined the demonstrations. Citizens said they want to safeguard the country's peace.
We don't need them to send us food because we can produce our own food. We can grow our cassava. We can grow our own potatoes. We're not starving. The United States talks about humanitarian aid. In fact, they are interested in our natural resources.
And following last week's illegal takeover of the Venezuelan embassy in Costa Rica by a number of Venezuelan citizens, the Costa Rican foreign minister has said they support dialogue and peaceful solutions to the political situation in the Caribbean region.
Costa Rica reaffirms its historical defense of peace, democracy, and human rights. In our condition as a nation without a standing army, we maintain our commitment with peaceful mechanisms for resolving conflicts, and our commitment with diplomacy and the tools of international law and multilateralism to resolve the political situation in Venezuela. So, following our constitutional principles of international action, we believe that the situation in Venezuela has to be solved with politics, peacefully and in a democratic way.
And the Mexican foreign minister has said that Mexico will only support a peaceful solution to the situation in Venezuela within the system established by the Montevideo mechanism.
Mexico already said before the U.S. Security Council that we support the Montevideo mechanism, which is based on seeking a peaceful solution in Venezuela. But that solution has to be taken by Venezuelans, and it entirely excludes the use of force. This mechanism has received the support of many countries, and it's what we support. Whatever is in line with our position, we will support. Whatever is against their position, we won't support.
The government and the opposition in Nicaragua have defined a roadmap that will guide the dialogue that resumed on Wednesday after a year of political unrest. Representatives of the government and the opposition agreed on 9 out of 12 points on the agenda after 7 hours of meeting. President Daniel Ortega was not present at these first talks. Dialogue is set to continue this Thursday. Our correspondent in Managua, Maria Jose Diaz, brings us more details.
The negotiation table between the government and the opposition started on Wednesday. In a press conference by representatives after the first day of talks, they say the parties work in defining a plan for negotiations. 9 out of 12 points proposed were reportedly approved. However, they haven't yet announced an agenda about the topics they will discuss. On Thursday, both sides are continuing the talks in an attempt to resolve the political crisis that started back in April 2018. The international community has supported these talks, as it do the majority of Nicaraguans who want peace and an economic recovery.
It's now 8 months since the failed coup in Nicaragua. Although the civil and political unrest is over, social and economical scars are still apparent. For ordinary Nicaraguans like Amanda, peace talks are the only way forward.
I have faith that the negotiation will go well. All Nicaraguan families and the young want peace. We want to triumph and move forward.
According to analyst Adolfo Pastran, it would be a big mistake for the opposition to pursue their all-or-nothing policy, as they did last year, which caused a catastrophic political crisis.
These people have already spoken in the past about the economy and the laws. They are known to the government. The government has already negotiated with the opposition, especially with businessmen. The most important thing about the talks is there aren't any conditions. So over the next few weeks, they should go smoothly.
The first round of talks took place in the morning at Francisco de Sola Inque in Nicaragua. By the afternoon, they had approved 9 of the 12 points of the peace negotiation.
In this first session, all parties approved a peace plan, and 9 of the initial 12 points were approved for peace talks.
The second round of peace talks will continue on Thursday.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ecuador's indigenous Waorani community in the Amazon region have filed a lawsuit against the government to protect their ancestral lands from an oil auction. The lawsuit alleges that the government has violated the Waorani people's rights to self-determination, identity, and territory. In 2018, the state announced an auction of 16 new oil concessions covering nearly 7 million acres of primary forest, including in the Waorani territory. They say the government failed to consult them before offering their lands in the Pastaza region to the highest bidding oil company.
Our land is full of life. Inside the jungle there are sacred animals, our river and our community, and that's what we want to protect. Our land is our life. Without our land we cannot live. We are here, all community members together, to speak up. Many other communities came to support us. We are going to ask for our right, and we hope they listen to us and respect us. Respect our lives. Our land is not for sale.
To talk more about this issue, we are joined live by Mitchell Anderson. He's the Executive Director of Amazon Frontlines, who has been supporting the Waorani campaign for many years. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
A lawsuit has been filed against the Ecuadorian government claiming that the Waorani's rights were violated. How so?
I mean, essentially what the Waorani are saying in their lawsuit and in the media and on the streets right now is that the Ecuadorian government is trying to sell their land right out from under them without their permission, without their consultation. And what that means to the Waorani, who are in ancient hunter-gatherer culture, is the Ecuadorian government is seeking to sell their hunting grounds, their rivers, their creeks, their waterfalls, everything that gives meaning to their life and allows them to survive physically, culturally, and spiritually. The Ecuadorian government is attempting to sell off the rights to extract oil in their lands, all in pursuit of, really the last drops of oil in a remote rainforest that's highly biodiverse and, that the Waorani people have been the guardians of for thousands of years. In legal terms, what the Waorani are saying is you violated our right to free, prior, and informed consent. You violated our right to collective territory, to self-determination, and you've also violated the rights of nature, which is a really important policy that the Ecuadorian government enshrined in their constitution years back, and the Ecuadorian government, in its pursuit of oil, is continuing to violate that right.
Now, Michelle, what is the Waorani community specifically demanding with this lawsuit?
First and foremost, the Waorani are demanding respect and dignity. They want the world, the Ecuadorian government, the oil companies, the ministries, and the people around the world to respect their way of seeing and thinking and feeling and living in their forest. That's at its core, at its heart, what this struggle is all about. You heard Namonte Ninkimo, who's the elected leader of the Guarani people of FtS and the 16 villages that are filing this lawsuit, say that our land is our life, and what they want is for their life and their land to be respected. Concretely, what the Guarani want from this lawsuit is for the FtS provincial judge to rule in their favor and basically say that yes, it's true, the Ecuadorian government, in attempting to auction off the Guarani people's land to the oil companies, has violated the right to consultation, to free, prior, and informed consent, violated the right to self-determination, and hopefully the judge will also issue an order to the Ecuadorian legislature to begin a participatory process of building a new law, a law that guarantees that indigenous peoples are consulted and have the right to free, prior, and informed consent over any extractive activities happening in their territory. And that's really the precedent-setting aspect of this case, and something that I think other indigenous nations across Ecuador and hopefully across the upper Amazon can gain from this lawsuit and from the Guarani people's determination.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you now. Do you think this legal challenge sets a precedent for future legal strategies in defense of indigenous communities?
Definitely. We hope so as well. I mean, right now, essentially, the indigenous folks, in Ecuador and across the Amazon are the ancestral owners of roughly 1.4 million square miles of primary rainforest, highly biodiverse rainforest. That's roughly 10 times the size of California. And that's really significant in the fight against climate change as well. And indigenous communities depend on this territory, depend on their land for their very survival. And they are the people that have the power to protect and defend their forests from really what is short-term and short-sighted decisions made by the local governments to extract finite resources from their territories and in the end cause environmental harm and continue global warming. What we think can happen from this lawsuit is other indigenous nations as well in Ecuador and hopefully across the upper Amazon can begin wielding the power of free, prior, and informed consent to protect their territories and live well in their lands.
Michelle, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We have been speaking with Michelle Anderson. He's Executive Director of Amazon Frontlines, supporting the Guarani community. And staying in Ecuador, former President Rafael Correa has rejected President Lenín Moreno's allegations that he is orchestrating a political campaign against his administration. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, reports.
In a televised message, Ecuador's President Lenín Moreno denied accusations made against him and his family. He said he didn't push out an empowerment in Spain and blamed the former President Rafael Correa for this smear campaign.
This is a strategy to undermine the country, conducted by former President Rafael Correa, who caused the biggest moral, economic, and social debacle that Ecuador has ever experienced.
The member of the National Assembly who made the accusations against Moreno and his relatives in Ecuador and Spain took to social media to condemn acts of violence outside a hotel in Guayaquil where he was going to hold a press briefing.
Unfortunately, people apparently close to the government, bad people, blocked my way into the hotel. And as you can see, they were carrying stones and had their faces covered. The police did nothing. They attacked the media. We hold the government responsible for my security.
Moreno's presidential message has provoked mixed reactions. For Vigilio Hernández of the Citizen Revolution movement, Moreno seems to be worried and is looking for a way to distract the attention of the public.
The president didn't answer the accusations. That's the main thing. He looked nervous and isolated. This is important because we see there is a political vacuum around the president and a complete absence of answers.
For his part, Rafael Correa insists the country will know the truth about President Moreno, and a number of political and social movements are warning that demands to revoke his presidential mandate will increase. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Senegalese President Macky Sall has won a second term in office, picking up 58% of the vote in the presidential election. According to the National Vote Counting Commission, his nearest rival, former Prime Minister Idrissa Seck, took 21% of the vote. The opposition has not commented on the results by the commission, as they're provisional until validated by the Constitutional Council. At least 5 people have been killed and 25 injured after a car bomb exploded in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. According to witnesses, there was an explosion followed by gunshots near a hotel in Makkah Al Mukarram Street, and several buildings were destroyed. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. Inspired by the Me Too movement, 2 actresses from France and Burkina Faso are calling for a similar movement in African cinema. They have used the French Même pas peur hashtag, meaning we are fearless, for their campaign. During the film festival, the actresses share their experiences of sexual harassment during their professional careers. One said she was attacked and disfigured by a film director.
It's everywhere, everywhere, and not only actresses, directors, scriptwriters, technicians experience sexual harassment or even more, sexual assaults, rape. So it was time, and we have a hashtag, not afraid, because fear has to be on their other side now.
It happened on September 30, 2017, on a film set where I was an assistant. The director attacked me with a bottle of beer. He slashed my face.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 7 people have died in Indonesia and dozens more are still trapped beneath the rubble of an illegal gold mine that collapsed. Some 19 miners have been saved since Tuesday night's accident, and rescuers are communicating with some still buried, raising hopes for more survivors. Rescuers so far have been forced to use spades and even their bare hands to clear away debris. The accident happened when support beams at the unlicensed site collapsed, according to the disaster agency. Indian police has tightened security across Indian states bordering with Pakistan amid rising tensions between the 2 neighbors. Police were seen putting up barricades and cordons by the northern state of Punjab, inspecting vehicles as they drove past. The Indian desert state Rajasthan was also on high alert, with police keeping a close watch on sensitive locations and vital installations. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called on his nation to, quote, stand as a wall against any attacks from Pakistan. Addressing his party members through a video conference, Modi told Indians that it's necessary to show faith in their security forces and ensure their morale won't fade. Thousands of Kashmiris have fled their homes due to the latest outbreak of hostilities between India and Pakistan. Leaving everything behind, many displaced people are taking shelter in this Pakistani university. Kashmiris fled after bombs fell across the heavily militarized zone between India and Pakistan on Wednesday.
We left our home in a village at 11 p.m. when heavy shelling was going on. We left behind our home belongings and livestock. We are here for the last 3 days. We couldn't find any transport, but we managed to get here with our children to save our lives.
And now we bring you some other stories from around the world.
A Renaissance oil painting, thought to be by artist Caravaggio, has been unveiled in London. This painting depicts the biblical tale of the widow Judith beheading the Assyrian general Holofernes to defend the city Bethula. The painting is expected to fetch €120 million at auction. In Algeria, police have arrested dozens of journalists protesting what they call censorship of their coverage of demonstrations against the 5th term in office for the president. Both state-owned and private media journalists joined this protest against reporting restrictions imposed by media house bosses.
Today we organized a sit-in a peaceful sit-in against the non-constitutional practice that censors the press. Today we want a free press. We want a press that shows reality as it is, whether it comes from those in power to the people or from the people to those in power.
Mexican Saul Canelo Alvarez and his fellow middleweight champion Daniel Jacobs faced off in New York ahead of their May 4th unification bout. For Alvarez, this will be his first fight since earning a technical knockout over Briton Rocky Fielding last month. The fight will be held at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.